constitutional carry.
We're getting
Oklahoma
blacklisted
handgun
immediately.
laws. Oklahoma law now generally authorizes any person who may legally carry, open or concealed without a license. That's pretty sick, Chase. So you can just it's constitutional carry. It's anybody wherever,
I can just
anytime.
fit a lever action in my pants and just fucking walk around.
Right. Okay.
Has
So you
anyone
just
ever said he's had a
assume
lever action in your pants, or are you just happy to see me?
that everybody is staying strapped constantly. Is
Yeah.
Texas also?
Yeah.
What states have?
It's like Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, Alaska.
Chase, you just have this down, man. You just have this down pat.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Oh shit, it's 25-25, Chase. Did you know that?
I'm surprised
Mick.
Louisiana isn't, man. That's something
the party
kind of
state.
shocking. Yeah, I know.
People are having a good time down there. This is the Strength Club show, by the way. People are popping in. We're just talking about something else for right now. We may trim this a little bit later. Mick, what are the handgun laws in Australia? Johnny G, how's it going, Johnny
Y'all
G?
don't own guns, do y'all?
You can, but it's a process to get one. That's for sure.
Of course.
Yeah, it's barely even worth it after all the shit you got to go through.
Oh, this is interesting. It has a registered gun rate, registered per 1,000 people. Okay, so I'm in North Carolina. There's 21 guns per 1,000 people registered. Oklahoma has 25. Texas has 34.
Per owner.
Per 1,000 people.
I was gonna say.
Per owner.
Jesus.
Dude, per owner, yeah. These are fucking rookie numbers, man.
Yeah, New York is 4.6. So if we just go to the more cut states, we're 4.6.
Hold on. Let's look at Illinois too.
Here we go. Check this out. So New Hampshire, this is the live free state. This is you do whatever you want. 52.1.
Oh, that's cool.
52 guns per person, according to Mick. Each person has 52 guns. Oh shit! New Mexico is at 58. Shit, New Mexico is really up there.
Yeah, that's because when they see people that look like you, they get
That's exactly it. Yeah. Virginia's at 49. That's pretty good. Out 6 weeks. Johnny G, did you injure yourself terribly? What happened? What happened to you, Johnny G? I'm guessing Johnny G tore his hamstring off, and his wife she broke her back lifting. All right. Oh, I think Washington may be the most cuck state. It is at
1.2.
1.2 per 1,000. Yes, 1.2 per 1,000. All right, we got to get back to the thing here. We're gonna put this up. Okay.
Post about we're actually doing this stream somewhere.
Yeah, man, post that somewhere. Yeah. Do an Instagram post and then tag Chase and be like, Chase is doing an embarrassing podcast where we all talk
Mexican
like
and a Jew.
With a Mexican and a Jew. An area of a Mexican and a Jew walk into a podcast. Cool Dude is cool. He's here, everybody. He's here. Cool Dude, did your name get flagged for Cool Dude 69? Is that why you changed it? Why did your name change? But yes, yeah. So we're doing the fatigue. What is fatigue in lifting? Fatigue is a very popular buzzword right now in the lifting community. As always, my arguments are going to come back to starting strength was way ahead of it. We were way ahead of it years ago. And then we'll talk about why. This came up because Chase had a terrible experience over the past few weeks. How are you feeling this week, Chase? Just to start up.
Actually, pretty good. This past week, I've still been kind of doing like only 2 exercises per workout, but I'm still doing like a 4-day split. For example, squatted once this week, but I hit a single at 585. I kind of took your advice and I was like, I want to try some heavier singles and stuff. I just hit one single, but
just fast singles.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Same thing on like the snatch and the clean and jerk. Clean and jerked 160, snatched 120. Pressed 315, benched, just did a 3x3. Because that's still kind of just not progressing as fast as like the other lifts. So I have a little bit more room to play with. And then I deadlifted 635. So I still have a good little layer of strength. And
so you're just popping some fast singles. That was a 635 per single. Okay. How'd the bar speed feel on that 635?
It was a little bit slow, but that was probably the heaviest thing I picked up off the floor in months.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I have more questions about this, but what exactly happened? It's a few weeks ago. You're Chase. You just did a competition. You're riding high. You just snatched 250 kilos, whatever it was. You go back to the gym. What happens?
Man, I didn't take into account how much stress I was taking into, the prep of the meet itself, and then just going back into it. I'm going to go just balls deep into training now. I didn't modify it. I went basically back to what I was doing pre-meet. So basically a bunch of heavy volume, mixed in with some heavy singles on the lifts and stuff like that. And the total stress of that training cycle just blew me out of the water, and I got super detrained to the point where I couldn't really lift anything that was typically a warm-up, and it felt ungodly heavy. Had to take the weight off the bar a lot, to the point where basically I didn't even touch the bar. I was just kind of just walking around just to manage stress.
just slowly walking
Yeah.
from Walmart to Whataburger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's the American track relay.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of can you guys hear all that craziness?
Yeah, that's why I asked
Oh,
about
yeah.
your dog.
Yeah.
Is he talking in Spanish, Mick? Do you think?
I think so, yeah. YouTube automatically censors that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, YouTube automatically does. Yes, my dog, as soon as I started, has the zoomies, and we have a very loud floor. So he's
Yeah.
just
We-
just doing a relay race right now.
All 5 of us watching this podcast right now can hear it.
All of our very dedicated 200 to 300 to 400.
We have 1,640 subscribers. Why do we only get 3 people watching this thing at a time?
Well, live streams are just hard, dude. It's
Yeah.
Sunday at 8:30. Most people are with their loving families, Mick. Unlike you.
Pussies.
Most people are praying with their wives and children in the evening.
Well, I mean, we're all here at the same time as well, so
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah, my autistic dog is sprinting around the room. Yeah.
So do you want to tell the viewers about your haircut, Alex?
I absolutely do not. No,
I feel
just
like this is
accept
a
the fact that
talking
it just looks like shit. Don't worry about it, everybody. Just accept it.
We actually have a comment from a hater. Do you want to hear it?
Sure, absolutely. Oh yeah, and this is why. This could be why. It's because they're not scheduled in advance. Classic.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
We're.
true.
I think I scheduled this one a few hours ago. G-Lock. I think maybe. I'm not sure. I kind of forget. What
obviously,
happened?
G-Lock's as much of a loser as us. So this is about the 531 episode.
Ooh, absolutely. I'm
The
excited.
Wendler 531.
I'm excited.
And Jethro Jones commented, "Neither of these kids could carry Jim Wendler's jockstrap."
Nice. Of course. Yeah. I think the.
Would you want to though?
Absolutely not. I don't know if anyone
No.
actually uses jock straps anymore. That is a boomer tell for the comment. That's like a 50-year-old guy. Absolutely. Yeah.
50? 50? Dude, I'm 46.
No, that dude's like 60.
That guy he may be in his 60s.
With the name like Jethro, yeah, like that's
Yeah.
yeah.
His name is Jethro. He uses a jock strap. I've been very deeply invested in the world of athletics. I haven't seen a single person use a jock strap
I haven't
ever
either.
in my entire life. It's the
Is that because
future,
he's just
man.
wrestling naked all the time?
It's the future, man. We've moved on to other better forms of underwear. I think back in the day when you had like
sheath underwear.
Have you tried the sheath underwear, Mick?
No, I haven't.
Chase, do you know what those are?
No.
Mick, can you explain those to Chase?
It
What are
was-
sheath underwear?
Sheath
It's
underwear.
basically it separates your balls from your Johnson.
Yeah.
It's got a hole in the front and a pouch, like a kangaroo pouch, and you put your.
Oh,
you
okay.
basically-
So that's kind
you
of like
have
the
sex
sack
with the
underwear.
front. Yeah, you have sex with the front of the.
I'm trying to see if
Yeah,
I can find a
basically.
diagram here.
No, I think there's a clothing brand called Sack, like SAXX, and it's kind of like the same premise. Like it holds it and cups your balls. Like I don't know how I like that, but
I'm glad you understand this so immediately, Chase. All right, here we go. This
Yeah.
is what it is. Hi, Mick. I may be loser, Phillies. I'm also. Yes. Yeah, this seems disturbing to me. I would never use these ever.
no, I wouldn't either.
This seems insane. Absolutely insane. Who has problems? Maybe it's just the very obese who are just constantly just sweating out the wazoo.
Apparently, some people are getting their balls stuck on their leg. I don't know. People.
What does that even mean?
I don't know.
They're
got
just glued
extremely long
together?
balls. I know.
They're just constantly sticky. Yes, we have the what do we have here? We have at Chase and Lee. Chase, what has your Instagram been up to recently? Anything?
Yeah, damn thing, dude. Not a
Fucking
damn thing.
thing. Chase is just busy.
Yawns during
He's
his
just doing the
plugs.
grind, man.
That's true, man. I really am. Like I don't know. Like if I actually wanted to be productive, I need to strap like a GoPro to my face and just be like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing."
This is
You
all.
should
this-
do that.
this
You
is
should
what
totally.
I'm doing.
I would totally watch that.
You could do a GoPro helmet day and then just try to snatch and clean around the GoPro. Maybe that would
have you
help you
ever
throw your
seen-
head back.
Have you seen the guy on Instagram that like watches trains with like the GoPro like strapped to his face like this, and it looks like it's so distorted his face, but it looks absolutely retarded.
Is he
You know who I'm talking
retarded?
about? No, he's like in the UK. I think he's like
So
borderline
definitely
autistic.
is.
And
Yeah,
what
he's
does he
probably
do? What is
autistic.
he actually doing?
He's a train spotter, so like he watches trains and shit like that. But like
Oh, so he's just
his
looking at
camera
trains.
angle is like fisheye lens right on his fucking face. So like his eyeballs look like this, and the bridge of his nose is like
There's nothing
5
wrong with the
inches long.
camera. I'll tell you that much right now.
So you've gotten
No,
into the YouTube the train spotting autistic
no,
train
no. Someone
viewership portion
someone
of
sent me
YouTube.
this on Instagram, and it's like he on the video in particular, like he was really excited about a train. He's making a lot of noise, and it's like the caption's like, "Oh, whenever you nut, but she keeps sucking," and he just looks retarded.
Amazing.
I want
Amazing.
Chase literally reaction videos to the videos that you watch. That's what I want. Can
That's
you
a
strap a
boomer thing.
GoPro to Phoebe's head while you're doing this stuff?
That's true. Yeah, Chase, you could do the GoPro being very strong and then just lots of weightlifting.
Yeah.
So anything been going on? How's keto doing, Nick?
Going all right. Yeah, we're recording some new stuff. Should have a new album and a single coming out pretty soon.
Did you figure out how to get me a canvas print of the album art from the last one?
No.
Come on, Nick. That was your only
Even
homework
that.
assignment. You don't even have a job. That's all you have to do. Man, we're gonna get into some dorky stuff here to kind of explain what happened to Chase. So just the quick recap: Chase trained really hard to do a competition, had his competition, which was sort of like his peak relative heaviest expression of training, and then just continued to run full steam. And then all of a sudden, warm up weights started feeling like catastrophically hard.
Mhm.
Now he has two options here. You can essentially try to train through it at severely reduced load, but that may have its own cost or impact, particularly if the loads are severely reduced. So like let's say if you normally pull 500 and then you get so fatigued to the point where you're like, oh man, 425 feels heavy as shit for a single and 500 usual single, that's close enough that you can probably stick with it. You're still kind of above this 80-ish% range. But if you're, let's say if you're pulling 500 or you're pulling 315 and you go to the gym and then your 225 warm up or your 225, let's say even if you try a working set of 5 with 225 feels terrible, you know something went awry. And then we're going to try to kind of explain what exactly went awry with that. So I think that the first terms that we should kind of go over is the SRA curve, because we're going to refer to that a lot.
Mhm.
Chase, what's the SRA curve?
So the acronym of the SRA is stress recovery adaptation. This is what everyone experiences if you're alive, right? This is all living things go through this. So like a good way to kind of put into terms of like how we're talking about this is like whenever you get a tan, the stress is the sunlight hitting you. The recovery is like all the pink shit, and then you kind of like shedding skin, and then the adaptation is now you're darker. So now you look like Alex, whereas beforehand you look like Mick, right?
Yes. Oh, that's great. We have a good sunburn example.
Can
Exactly.
we just put our
This is
faces
what
together,
happens.
Alex? You can see.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, so we have the SRA curve, and the SRA curve has it talks kind of around something, and it talks around the concept of fatigue. We can call fatigue the cost of training, right? So like a deadlift is going to be more fatiguing than a chin up will, and a chin up will be more fatiguing than a curl, right? So like we can just kind of say weight on the bar is a really good proxy for this. Muscle groups involved is going to be a really good proxy. Like you can't just do muscle groups because then like a Turkish get up would be the most fatiguing thing in the world. But like a deadlift, for example, it's not as much of a range of motion. It's not as exactly as much muscle mass, things like that. But it's just going to be catastrophically heavier, significantly, exponentially heavier. That's what we're looking for. So fatigue is the cost of training, and then that's what demands the recovery, right? So like we have the stimulus, which is going to be our S. So like stimulus S, we can do stressor or stimulus. That's both the reward and the result of training. It's something that needs to be happening all the time. And then the cost of training is our fatigue, right? So we're balancing the stimulus that we're putting in and then the fatigue that stimulus costs. And then we can think about this is a very basic, return on investment, bang for buck, juice per squeeze, things like that. And then how exactly, like Chase, if you had to relate this back to the 4 criteria that we use for exercise selection, and this stimulus to fatigue ratio, SFR ratio, return on investment, how would you try to connect those if you had to?
So I want to do something that allows me to work all my body, right? So for example, like one of the criteria is the most muscle mass over the greatest effective range of motion using the most weight. That's kind of all 3, thus getting stronger. So now if I cause a good adequate amount of stress from like doing a squat, a press, and a deadlift in a session, day 1, I have to recover it within that that stress within, usually about 24 to 48 hours. That's the time usually that allows me to adapt to that stress, and then I can do a new stressor going forward. Now, this kind of continues as you get more into training. So, like an intermediate, someone who is about like a week worth of stress. So, let's say like Monday is your heavy day. The next corresponding Monday, you add 5 pounds, and now you're recovering from that stress, and you're thus getting stronger with that adaptation. Someone who's an advanced athlete, it's going to be way longer than a month, or rather than a week. It's probably going to be probably about 2 weeks to months to a year, just depending on how far along this person is, right?
Yeah, and
And
that's what's
as
been that long timeline is something that we're seeing now, basically.
Mhm.
So it's like, how long have you been kind of in this just giant hole for recovery wise?
Man, I'd probably
2.5,
say
3 weeks.
well, I'd probably even go back further. Like how long I've been applying this stress has probably been since December. So
Yeah,
I've
so it's
had
been this
about
big rolling wave of
yeah,
training. The wave crashed at
yep.
competition, and then you're just in this big recovery hole.
Hmm.
And then that's been that can literally last a few weeks, where you can
Oh
just
yes.
feel like everything is slow, joints
Hmm.
are achy, nothing exactly is the same.
Hmm.
Um, so when we're relating our criteria, we're relating. We talk about the criteria all the time on this show and in starting trainers in general. Um, the 4 criteria are just attempts to literally just maximize this SFR ratio and stimulus and fatigue. Right, we're choosing things that are like relatively the least fatiguing because we're trying to spread the workout all over the place. So we're not just doing like tempo front squats for the quads because we're just hammering the quads. You know what I mean? And that's it. We're trying to spread that stimulus all over the place, and that also helps dissipate the fatigue. So basically, what we're doing, with the criteria is attempting to maximize this. So when you're in the rest of the exercise science space or the lifting space in general, people are talking about fatigue, SFR ratios, all that sort of RP stuff. This is basically what it comes back to. Now, this is relevant in programming. It's not really relevant in programming if you're only doing one workout ever. Like if I told
Hmm.
you, Chase, I was like, Chase, you have to make the most gains you possibly can make in one session, and then that's it. You're done lifting. You would just do as much volume as you could until you basically fell over.
Exactly.
Um, but fatigue accumulates because you're working out many sessions in a row. So like what we were just
Hmm.
talking about with Chase, he had this big wave of training from December up to competition, and then it crashed. So fatigue accumulating. Um, the novice, some people say it doesn't for the novice. It absolutely does, and it does for the intermediate. Chase, can you tell me about kind of, it's the end of someone's LP. They're doing
Hmm.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The squats are really hard. Would you say that the fatigue is accumulating from Monday to Wednesday to Friday? And
Oh
what does
yes,
that look
certainly.
like? How do you see that in the lifter? What happens?
Yeah, like whenever you have a coach there watching you, or even just like you yourself, you're kind of noticing this phenomena of like the bar speed will drastically slow down with the squat. So, like, let's say the first set feels all right. The second set, it's about similar to the first, but then that third set, everything almost feels like a grinder to where now you have to make a change. So that way, the stress from the squat, you can adapt to it. What we typically do again is like do like a top set and back offs or what I've done in the past, but to where I still have that stimulus to carry over, but I'm not getting a full on huge dose of stress from the three accumulating 3 sets of 5, right? So it's just the top set and back off. But the same thing happens with the deadlift where you see like the bar speed starts to slow down, like
Mm-hmm.
the later reps in the set just turn to shit. With the upper body stuff, it's kind of the opposite where you need more stress, but at the same time, if you see that stress is not adequate enough, generally it's the bar speed. The technical aspect of the lift starts to fall apart to where it just all looks sloppy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically the things that you're looking for, you can, if you have someone tracking their bar speed, it's super helpful data.
Hmm.
Even if you don't see their lifts, you can get a good read of fatigue just by looking at bar speed. This is a course in that all the first 3 questions have been answered. So they're the programming is fine. They're not they're taking really long rest times, and they're eating enough. They're sleeping, things like that. Um, so we say like the bar speed is going down, as in the lifter is moving slower and slower and slower with like a with this and this is with respect to this similar expectation. So it's like if we do like 315 on the first workout and then 335 on the second workout, that lifter should slow down on the second
Hmm.
workout, absolutely, right? But if they're doing 310 and 315, that's such a small difference.
Yeah.
5 pounds in the 300, that's a error margin. you know um, So it's basically, we should expect speeds to remain pretty constant. If a lifter is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger, that bar speed should remain pretty flat. Okay. So we're seeing this fatigue accumulating, right? We're starting to see kind of aches and pains and things like that accumulating over time. We recognize it with the intermediate. So it's like it's something that we have to deal with. This is why fatigue basically is relevant to programming. We'll kind of go to, we'll go back to this slide afterwards. This is something that was really helpful for me in sort of like conceptualizing what progressive overload was. Like, what was the first time you heard the phrase progressive overload, Chase?
Probably within like a few years of actually doing this program. Someone said it, but like it didn't really even correspond to me because, granted, like I was young enough to where I was still recovering, I was still adapting all that stuff. It wasn't until like I probably stopped doing football and actually ran through my final novice linear progression into a more intermediate and then thus into a more advanced. I was like, okay, yeah, progressive overload and all that stuff. Yeah, that makes sense now.
Yeah, it's like this is when these terms actually come into play. Like you don't have to think about this for a long time, which is really
exactly
cool. When you do have to start thinking about it, it's in the intermediate area where like Johnny G has been, and then Johnny G has just been fumbling the bag on taking rest days, adding too much weight, not doing enough volume, things like that, and then repeating, hurting himself. Let me know what happened, Johnny G. By the way, he said he had to take out 6 weeks of.
He said gallbladder surgery.
Where was that? Are you shitting me?
Yeah, it was way down at the bottom.
There it is, dude. Yep. You got the gallbladder off. Can waiting too long hinder progress? Absolutely, yeah. So waiting too long is just not training, and not training doesn't make you better at training.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, short and simple. So let's take a lifter. This is their squat, by the way. Let's arbitrary volume. Could be 3 sets of 5, 5 sets of 3, whatever. If they're doing 300, 305, and 310, and this is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so 48 hours between bouts. They get through workout A, it moves the fastest it's going to be of the week. Workout B is going to be a little bit slower, and then 310, that could be first set of 5 goes fine. Second set's 4, third set is 4. Right, that's a pretty typical failure rate. Nick, yeah, Nick's a BJJ guy. A separate situation for Nick because he's just getting his ass kicked all the time. That's where fatigue is coming in for him. So Chase, you kind of ran us through some of the modifications you would make. But why would you say that this lifter would fail 310 just in general? What would it be?
So it's the stress that you're accumulating from A and B. So like, again, you said that 300 was moving fine, but you still got to think that that's still causing some amount of stress to the system, even though the lifter looks like it's moving fine. His technique isn't breaking down. So you still have to account for that. And then now we're going into like B, the scenario of he could maybe have fucked up his sleep or something like that. It could make 305 look a little bit harder. But let's say again, like those factors are still in his control and everything looks good. The fatigue from A is still going to accumulate with B, and then now C, it could just be too much of the accumulating stress to where now form breaks down, the bar speed looks like shit, and now we have to do a change now.
Yes, yeah. So basically, what we're saying is that like if we were to look at fatigue as just like an arbitrary value on a graph, they were at like 0. We're at a donut on Monday because he had a whole weekend of eating Krispy Kreme and Whataburger. He's feeling great. On Monday, 0 fatigue, 0 units of fatigue, and then 300. It's some, but it's barely noticeable. On B, it's getting up there. It's starting to be noticeable. He hasn't failed anything yet, but it's getting there. And then by the time he gets to Friday, it's been a stressful work week. He hasn't been getting as much sleep as he should. Things to that effect. That's when we see that failure peak at C. What we saw there, so we can say literally this is 1 week cycle for a novice lifter, is what Chase has probably likely experienced over months, basically, of just like this giant peak of stress and then a big crash afterwards. And then this lifter who's new may feel bad for a weekend. He may feel bad for a weekend and then needs one offset session on Monday and he's fine. He's ready to rock by Wednesday. Whereas Chase may need, 2-3 weeks. That's good. That's talking about a deload. We'll talk about deload afterwards. But this is, I would say, the thing I want to talk about the most with progressive overload. The adaptation permits the increase. This is an incredibly important sentence. The adaptation permits you to take the increase, but it also is the increase itself. It's not like holy trinity levels of confusing, but it's kind of close. So if we just kind of go back to this lifter here and then say, could he have done 310 on the first workout, right? Because the 300 had some wiggle room. 300 was pretty fast, right? So could he have just done 310? Absolutely. But then that fatigue cost would have been higher, right? So if the fatigue cost would have been higher, he may have failed on, let's say, the second workout as opposed to the third.
Yeah.
Right. And then if we zoom our timeline out and we say it's been a week, how much squatting has this guy gotten in? He's now gotten in Monday and Wednesday and most of Friday, if not all of Friday. Right. Friday was a little bit of a mismanaged call if he still did a straight 3x5. Now, if he just kind of ran ahead and he did as heavy as he possibly could have, then he would have done 310 on the first workout and then failed on the second workout. And then you end up Johnny G'ing yourself. Sorry to make fun of you, Johnny G. And then you end up Johnny G'ing yourself, and then now you're at this point where you're just not getting enough training in. Johnny said my heavy felt light, so I guess my new HLM is working for me. Yeah, man, that's good to hear. But yeah, so basically, like recovery kind of goes up and down, performance goes up and down and up and down, and what you're doing when you're trying to pick the weight on the bar is match where you are in that curve, basically, right? Because we go back, we have our SRA curve. As you have this level of fatigue at various times, some days you may feel great, some days you may feel shitty. You're trying to match your performance to those days. Now, the thing here is some people kind of make this mistake in their thinking, and they'll be like, I can't squat 305 until I squat 300. I can't squat 310 until I squat 305. You can, it's just dumb and stupid.
Yeah.
Right. Because the goal here is to can verifiably get stronger. And that means taking a PR that we're 100% sure that you're taking. But it also is like, quote, easier training. You know what I mean? So it's like if this guy could have done 310 on the first workout, that's great. But now he got in 2 sessions at 300 and 305. That's also productive. Any thoughts on this, Chase? You see this all the time at the end of the LP.
No, that's good. Like, I mean, the reason why we take 5-pound jumps too is like it's granted. I mean, yes, we can go smaller with the jumps, but generally those are the greatest and the smallest amount of incremental stress that we can apply that works every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to like going like a 10-pound jump, yeah, that person may run it out for 3 weeks, but if I take like that same person then do 5-pound jumps, we could add another 2 weeks with that same program instead of changing a bunch of variables instead of just the load on the bar.
Mm-hmm.
To where now I have to affect the stress that I'm trying to accumulate.
Yeah, that's it. Hit the nail on the head there. Like we choose that because it's there's a logistical reason, of course, because barbells 5 pounds, we're not using microplates, things like that. But basically, it's like it's a relatively convenient unit because people tend to get stronger in honestly in a pretty similar amount. Like if you have a guy he's like not the most athletic guy, he comes and he squats 180. And then it's like it's kind of grindy. And the next time he squats 185, it's the same exact speed. And then that process may go from 180 to 260 with just adding 5-pound jumps. And you're like, perfect. That's it. I don't want to fuck with that. Now we need to talk about what the adaptation is. The adaptation we're looking for, remember, SRA curve, SRA, the A adaptation. It is muscular growth, but then also the muscle that you have getting stronger, like your ability to move them neurologically. This is something that people need to understand. Adaptation is like a constant rolling process. It's happening constantly because you're alive constantly. It's not like it's a computer that's doing a problem and you're shutting the computer off and then turning it back on. Matthew Joseph. How's it going, MJ? How's it going, dude? So, when our lifter, he's doing 305, 310, or 300, 305, and 310, he's adapting to squatting and getting stronger and getting more muscular the entire time, right? It's not like he's getting 5 pounds worth more muscular in between A and B, and then it stops, and then he's not going to nothing else is going to happen until he gets to 310, right? How do you explain this process to people, Chase, if people ask you questions about this?
Man, I was kind of thinking of it too, like when we were saying this, it's almost like you're revving up like a car, like on the RPM, like you're pushing it and you're pushing it. It doesn't go from like 7 and then all the way back down to 1, right? It still goes through all the other, the 6, 5, 4, all those gauges and stuff like that. It's kind of the same thing with the adaptation. So like, it's not just something that's going to completely shut off, but it may slow down depending on the stress that you're giving it, or it may ramp up depending on the stress you're giving it, right? But what we're doing is we're feeding in the smallest amount that you can adapt to. That's not too much and not too little with the 5-pound jumps. To where we're still steadily pushing into like the red line area, but we're not stressing you too much.
That's a great way to think about it. I'm going to totally steal that, Chase.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Yeah, because it's like if you can get where you're going, like if I can get to a nice cruising speed at like 2.5
Yeah.
K, I'm like perfect. This is all I need. I like,
Yep.
I'm satisfying my wind conditions. I'm getting where I need to go. If the training can be easy, it should be easy. The thing I like to talk to people about with this is body weight gain. So like I'm 182 pounds right now. If next week I'm 183 pounds, that didn't happen in like a single meal where I was like perfect, 1 pound, boom, 1 extra
Yeah.
pound, that was it. I'm gaining grams of weight constantly. It's like an hour and I'm like, perfect, I've gained 20 grams of weight. Yes, I did it. It's a constant 24/7 thing that is happening. That's the same exact thing with adaptation, right?
Yep.
So what you're doing, it's like that. It's a fire that you're stoking with training, basically.
Yeah.
And if you're training really hard, you're eating your groceries, you're sleeping 10 hours a night, that fire is going to be pretty big. So it's like you're giving it a lot of training. You're doing 6 sets of benching work. You're doing 4 sets of deadlifts and a bunch of front squats, and you're pushing a ladder and all that shit. You're putting in a big stimulus. You're putting in a lot of coals in the fire, and then that adaptation is going to constantly happen through that process. Now, what happens, Chase? So, all right, so let's say when our fatigue curve, or let's say the amount of fatigue we have is just going up and up and up and up. And then the stimulus that we're going in, we're also trying to go up. What happens when those lines kind of intersect, basically? What happens?
Where the stimulus and then the adaptation are both
Or
a little high?
let's say okay, so we'll go back to this example, right? So like the lifter did 300, 305, then 310. Our expectation was that he could do 310, but he was too fatigued to do 310.
Yep.
Right. So it's like our expectations are in this direction, and fatigue is like, fuck no, you're not doing it. What happens?
Going forward after that 310 exposure, like what we need to do, or
like why, if you had to come up with a technical definition as to why he failed.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So like fatigue has now surpassed his ability to adapt from the stimulus. So what we got to do is just manage fatigue at this point. So we would say he is detrained at that point. Is that what you're looking for, or?
I think what I'm looking for is our expectations didn't match up with the reality of adaptation. Right. So like fatigue, like we had these expectations that you're just going to get stronger forever and everyone's beautiful and it's amazing. That's great. So the expectations are going up, and then fatigue is also going up at a different rate. Right. And then once basically the amount of fatigue we have, because that limits our performance, once that amount of fatigue is so high that you can't match your expectations, you need to change your expectations. And then that's also going to change fatigue backwards.
Gotcha.
Right.
Well, yeah, I guess another way to say it is like, yeah, your goal, I guess, is still remaining the same, but the process of how you're getting there, i.e., like programming at that point, has to change to now accumulate, or to rather fit the rate of everything that you're experiencing, whether it's fatigue, whether it's your adaptation, or whatever the stress is. I guess would that be a better way of putting it too?
Yeah. Ideally, whenever we do these things, I like to have like 3 ways of saying it, just so that it gets through our amazing audience's head. Yes, and then now this goes back to number 1, the adaptation permits the increase. Sometimes the fatigue, or the expression of fatigue, blocks that increase. Let's say I had this here. Yes, so this was the next part of what. So basically, we're recovering from imparted fatigue. The adaptations are happening constantly, but sometimes those adaptations are masked or suppressed. And then we have this thing called, like, in some of the dorky programming old textbooks from 4 decades ago, they would say suppression and expression, right? So like a good, let's say like an Olympic weightlifting taper for Chase, his last 2 weeks, it's like a lot of heavy stuff. It's all still moving pretty fast, but basically the goal is to let fatigue taper. Fatigue is going down, right? And then fatigue going down allows for performance to go up, right? So we're expressing his adaptations that we got because we're expressing that because we're suppressing fatigue. So fatigue is going down, and then fitness is going up. Some people call this like the what is it called? It's the other 2-factor model. They call it like the fitness fatigue model, basically. So as fatigue goes up, fitness also goes up, but the expression of fitness goes down, basically. Yes. So this is another another good way to think about it. Anything to add there, Chase?
No. No, that makes sense. I've never heard that. But and plus I don't go like deep into like the archives of like
into the
of
dusty
like the
libraries of
programming.
programming.
But no, that makes sense though.
Okay, cool. Good. Making sure that we're all tracking. So we have fatigue and we have our SRA. Now the important thing is that programming is essentially a game of expectations. If your expectations are too high, it's going to seem as if you failed your programming, right? So if you're doing your LP and you're doing 10-pound increases, or you're an intermediate lifter, you're benching 250, and you're like, I should be able to take 5 pounds a week, easy. And it's like, so by next year you should be benching 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, is that really what you expect as an intermediate lifter? Is 5 pounds a week? Are you fucking insane? All those conversations happen. So it's like, you're reading practical programming. It's like the intermediate lifters can make 5 pounds a week, and you're like, how long am I an intermediate for? And it's like, maybe actually just 2 or 3 months. You know what I mean? It may not actually be that long, because otherwise you'd be benching 500 in your second year of intermediate training, because you're like, fuck, I'm the best lifter in the whole world. But that's not really how it works. Your rate of adaptation that you have as an individual, it's not necessarily fixed, right? Because like Chase's rate of adaptation is probably a little bit higher because you're taking insulin, because it's shuttling glycogen into the muscles. Sick as hell. If Chase got on more tren, his rate of adaptation would be higher.
Well, not only that too, you got like age is a factor, genetics is a factor, and all that shit.
Yeah.
Too,
so actually, let's go through that. So what do we have? We have kind of genetic capacity. We have age. What else are we thinking?
So I guess external shit. So in my example, it's insulin. If someone else were to take another
exogenous chemicals, TRT, things like that. All right. We're number 4.
I'd say environmental stuff. So like my overall stress in life really isn't that much compared to like, let's say like a CEO, a doctor, some like my lifestyle permits me to where my biggest stress in life is the gym. Right. I'm not
amazing.
Yeah. I'm not shooting people that no one's shooting at me. I'm not delivering babies. I'm not doing a bunch of crazy shit like that. Right. I'm literally just watching people lift heavy shit all day.
The man of leisure.
Fixing it. Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah. All right. So that's a good number. Point number 4. Stress environment. Oh, Ernest is here. How's it going, Ernest? How's it going, dude? Ernest is he's an army guy. I'm not doxing him, but he is shooting people all the time, constantly.
Yeah. So his stress is pretty high.
Anyone he can get his hands on. Yeah, so we have external stressors, right? And this is basically going to this is the R portion of the SRA curve. So SR, recovery R, that's gonna be that. And then we also have things that influence rate of adaptation. So like calorie balance, for example. Like, are you in a 1,500 calorie surplus a day? What did Nick say? Long comment. If you have things that are junky feeling, because when you're doing your sport, they're under lots of stress in that specific area. So your fatigue increases from lifting. You feel it in those specific areas. First is pain or whatever else. Yes, good question, Nick. We'll go to that question. This is very important, though. Chase, did you read this?
Yeah, in the poultry factory.
Sick as hell.
Yeah.
Just blessed.
Choking a bunch of chickens.
Absolutely. If that's serious, do you get discounts on poultry, cool dude? Are you just like living the life, just surrounded by chicken breast constantly?
He takes a chicken home and just fucking puts it in his pocket.
A whole chicken, just sliding raw chicken breast in his pocket in his lab coat. This is an aside tangent, everybody. There's a video. I won't put it in the description, but if you find it, there's like a PETA protest or some sort of animal rights protest where they go to a chicken slaughterhouse, and then there's these big machines where essentially like the chicken's neck goes in the machine and it's just a hanging chicken, and then it goes in this conveyor belt. One of the activists locked his neck to the machine. Awesome. Like this machine, and then some random, day laborer just turns it on because he's working in a separate area of the factory, and then you have like all of these like PETA activists like trying to break this machine because their friend is being strangled by the thing. That's a true internet classic. If anyone has good YouTube, Google Foo, you can find that. But back to Nick's. My wife works in poultry. What is everyone?
Dude, that's awesome.
Is everybody here somehow related to the poultry industry? Everybody's in the chicken game, man. His wife works in poultry, and yes, we get discounts on chicken. This is amazing.
That's big, dude.
That is big.
Eggs and all that shit right now? Fuck, dude.
Oh my god. It's like, that is what the fuck we're gonna find out. Sure. Yeah, that is exactly what it was. He was like, I'm gonna try to get myself in a live leak video. Yes. Yeah. So we have imparted fatigue, and then we'll talk about basically like how this fatigue expresses itself. So like Chase's sport, his life, his dreams, all of it, it relates to lifting weight, moving fucking iron around. So whenever Chase's fatigue really expresses itself after the competition, what happened, Chase? Like you were trying to clean 120 on warm ups, and you were like, what the hell is going
Exactly.
on?
Yeah, so it's typical warm up weights that we're now feeling like 1 rep maxes.
Yeah. And then Nick, just to kind of give you like some bouncing off points for these things. Like if I know, like, it just happened actually last week. I did a bunch of squat volume work at 275. I just did as many 8s as I could with like a 2-minute rest at 275, just like banging them out for conditioning work. I gave myself 24 hours to rest. The next practice I was doing, anytime I was going for any sort of pickup, suplex, Uchimata, Seo, anything like that, like my knees would feel tender, ankles, hips, all that sort of stuff. So basically, like the fatigue doesn't always express itself as muscular soreness. Like Chase, you weren't sore when you were trying to pull those, right?
Oh no, like I woke up feeling great, but like yeah, it's like what you're saying.
Exactly.
It's the joint of just like how much stress that it's been accumulated, how much compression, how much tension, how much moment you've literally been experiencing through whatever movement patterns that you're doing on a daily basis, and now it's come to the point where your body can't handle it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like I wouldn't feel particularly sore. Like it wasn't like Chase's quads were ripped up and he was like, "Oh God, I can't get off the
No,
chair." You
it's
know what I
not that at
mean?
all.
It's not that sort of soreness that expresses itself, but it will be like, and it's different for everybody. It's like dull aches and pains. It
Yep.
just things just feel a little unstable. Like like for me, sometimes like if my lower body's really fatigued, my ankles will feel wobbly. From just
Hmm.
doing too much judo or wrestling. So it's like it's very specific to you, and you will notice it. You just have to kind of keep your brain on to like keep track of
Yeah.
those things. We got a good question. I'm curious about your thoughts on this one, Chase. G-Lock said, my deadlift slows down after one set after lifting painfully light, less than 60% of my max. Is this just a programming issue? I normally deadlift once a week, 1 to 3 sets.
I'd be curious to see what he's doing with the rest of it. So, like, let's say, like, on that same session, G, like, are you squatting something really fucking heavy for a set of 5 for a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
singles? And then, yeah, I'd be like, yeah, your deadlift's probably going to slow even with that drop in the total amount of weight. But like, if this was like your lighter day, to where even like the session beforehand wasn't that stressful,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know. Yeah, I would have to see probably the bigger programming picture here.
Yeah, the bigger programming picture for sure. Like you basically need to think like, what is the environment of fatigue, basically?
Hmm.
Like what is happening with that lifter overall? Like,
Or I mean, it could be this. Do you like? I mean, so let's say like you're doing a squat and a press or something. So he says on deadlift days, deadlifts is my first exercise. Okay. If you're eating enough, G-Lock, I would say that that'd be the other consideration. Where if you don't have enough carbs and then like you're pulling like maybe the first or 2 reps and then it just kind of slowly starts petering off, at that point that's usually a carbohydrate issue. But I think it could just be a programming issue going forward.
Yeah, and then you also want to think about G-Lock, like the timelines are long. It's not just that day.
Hmm.
Like it's
It could have been last week that you
a
fucked shit
while.
up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is something for sure. And then Knickknack said, recent example is allowing bad positions in practice to practice on defense, but when he does, people throw up submissions. And I'm testing how much my strength can save me. Yes, yeah, strength is very helpful. Not getting submitted. Today my elbows hurt a lot, so I had a strap to do my deadlifts. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like if I'm defending a neck crank for a while, if someone's just hanging on my head, or if I'm picking people up kind of with my neck, like the overhead press suffers, the squat suffers, and I'm just trying to hold a bar on my back. Like the bench press when I'm getting my shoulders tight, that suffers. Like it's not just soreness. A lot of people think that soreness is really the only thing with fatigue. But once you've been lifting for a while, you start to notice a ton of other stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, this is the thing is that, and this isn't a very important thing for lifters to understand, is that even if you're not lifting a PR, you're still adapting,
Yeah.
right? So even if, like let's say across the week you gain 1 pound of body weight, but one day you're 3 pounds down, the next day you're 2 pounds up, the next day you're 1.5 pounds down, you're still gaining weight that whole time, right? But it goes up and down.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, you're not going to gain exactly a seventh of a pound every day. It does not work like that. So the adaptations can be suppressed because you have high levels of fatigue. It is very worthwhile to lift while you do that. So like, let's go back to Chase's example. How long was your comp prep? You said, what was it, December or January?
I'd say from about January to March, so about 3 months.
Right. So through that whole time, Chase is accumulating more fatigue and he's training through that process. Right. So if Chase only lifted a PR every time he lifted, he would never get any stronger. Basically,
No.
everyone's lifting career would end right at their LP. Basically, if it was
Yeah.
only PRs only all the time. So we have to understand that like you're gonna be carrying fatigue around, right? You're gonna be kind of in a recovery hole. And then what happens is that you're still going to adapt through that whole process. Like some people get really amazed by tapers and peaks. Like, I don't know, Chase, if you ever had a really strong taper. But, for my last time I pulled over 500, like I didn't pull anything past 435 for like 3 or 4 weeks prior. I was just constantly just grinding through volume work at that lower intensity. I was doing like paused singles with like, the low fours. And then you pull like 435 or so in the final go. And you're like, okay, that's fine. You know what I mean? So it's like you're adapting through that whole process, right? But that adaptation is suppressed. You just can't tell what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing that you have to deal with intermediate lifters.
And also too, like if you look at that adaptation, like it expresses itself for 1 day or like 1 hour, whatever, however long the competition lasts for, right? So if we take in, like, here's the other extreme of like bodybuilding, like everything has to be just right for that 1 hour. Like their body has to look exactly how they want to. They have to just do all this madness with prep for just 1 hour, and that's kind of like how what we're seeing whenever we have a competition or an event is that these months, weeks that we're doing is now expressing itself, and it is showing maybe an hour or 2 hour, whatever we're doing for those past 3 months. So you can't really hang on to that 1 hour of being, oh fuck, like I look great, or I'm just really explosive all the damn time, because it doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah. So like if you compare and I always tell people this too, you got to compare like your shitty days to your shitty days and compare your best days to your best days. You don't want to compare your best day to a shitty day. How many days, like a year, do you think you are truly like locked in, dialed in, you feel amazing, Chase? How many days does that happen for you?
Fuck, dude, maybe a week's worth, like 7 out of a year.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of lines up with what I've seen for people.
Yeah.
Like you'll get somewhere if you're strong as a motherfucker and things take a long time to peak, you're gonna get between like 5 to 10 exposures of feeling amazing for that year, literally that year.
Yeah.
We're not kidding. I mean, like and it applies to other sports too. It's like, for me, grappling, there are just specific days where I felt absolutely dialed in, and I can remember them I can remember every time that's happened because it's happened so few times, and then what the big thing is with the strength sports is that, you may be judging like, oh man, like last year I pulled 405 for that single and it was the fastest rep I've ever done, and then now this year I'm only pulling 405 for a triple and it's really slow, like that may seem like there's no progress there, but you're comparing the best day that you had in 2022 to like an average day in 2023. How long did it take you to kind of realize that, Chase? Was that like a thing? Was this ever an issue in your life with programming where you were like, man, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I would say so, because like it's just with my personality, just like, man, we got to push it to the extreme all the time. And then finally with like this Olympic stuff, this has been kind of a cool little thing with this journey, is just like or this progress, is that whenever there's days that you feel great, you just got to go and you got to hit it. Whereas like the vast majority of the time, it all feels like shit. You just got to work on like whatever cue that you're trying to really hound in. But the days that, again, that you feel great, hit as heavy as you can, because you're not going to get that for a while.
Yeah, it's not going to get for a while, and then chances are it's very rarely an accident. It's not let's say it can be unintentional, but it's not an accident. Does that make sense,
Yeah.
Chase?
Yeah.
So like, you may be accidentally tapering. You may be like people say the stars are aligning with things, like the Jupiter's in the perfect orbit, whatever the hell it is, like it may be I had the bagel that I wanted that morning. I didn't get to traffic on the way to the gym. I actually slept 9 hours for the past, 4 or 5 nights, something, whatever it is, like you have all of these things, all of these stars that need to align, and you get a few days a year that truly feel good,
Mhm.
um, and then when it comes to programming, it's very possible that there are like subtle influences that allow these peaks and tapers. Like it's very intentional. So like Chase's taper for his last competition, it was very intentional. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But in some directions, it can be unintentional, and then you kill yourself and need to deload, like what happened to
Yep.
Chase. And then other times, you can do it in the other direction where it's unintentional, and you create a taper or you create a peak.
Yep.
So when we're talking deloads, Chase, so like let's say someone has dramatically mismanaged fatigue. They fucked up the fatigue game. They're way too fatigued, and they can barely lift 60% of what they normally do. What do
Yep.
you do? What happens?
Man, it depends on like how their program looks. So let's say like for my example, like I was doing a lot of frequency. So I have 4 days of lifting, maybe even five. We're dropping down the number of days in the gym. So that way my exposure to stress is now being cut in one
Mm-hmm.
facet there. How many movements I'm doing in that session. So beforehand, I was doing a snatch, a clean and jerk, maybe an upper body, and then a squat or a deadlift. So that's 4 movements. So now I'm going to cut that to either 3, 2, 1, whatever I can manage for that day. And then with the loads, try to maintain as much as I can there, meaning I don't want to go down to 60% for this week. Maybe I go maybe 60 on Monday. Wednesday, I bump it up to 80. And then maybe on Friday, back to 85 to where like I'm almost back to the weights I was handling. But again, the stress overall is less because my time of exposure in the gym is less. So now my movements that I'm doing, I'm only doing 2 versus 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 days out of the week, now I'm only back to 3.
So you've pulled down volume significantly. You've pulled down frequency as a function of that volume, and then
Exactly.
exercise selection. You tend to cut out like the random stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's an important one, that last one. So it's like you normally be doing, like high pulls, like snatch presses, behind the back
Overhead
presses,
squats. Yeah.
overhead squats, all that
Stuff like
stuff
that.
out,
Yep.
basically. Right. So then we're coming back to basics. And then we're trying to, and we can go back to this one. We're trying now to get a better ROI, right? Because before we didn't care about how much fatigue we were imparting, clearly, because we fucked up with programming. So
Mhm.
now what's happening is that we're trying to get back to like the most stimulating things for the absolute lowest fatigue cost.
Yep.
And then that's when that fatigue comes down. What did Dick say? He said, "I don't think I've ever thought of that. Thought of it like that actually, and it does help to put progress in perspective." Yeah, think about competition. Like if you if you're a grappler and you're competing 5 or 6 times a year, that's a lot. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? 5 or 6 good days a year. Let's say if you performed well at every one of those competitions, that's 5 or 6 good days. That's a blessing, absolute blessing.
Yeah.
How many competitions did you do last year, Chase, or within the last 12 months? 3,
About
4?
3. Yeah. 3 or
3 or
4.
4. Right. So that means Chase is banking on 3 or 4 good days in a
Yep.
12-month period. And it may sound depressing, but it's also kind of pretty optimistic in some ways. You're like, wow, I get 3 good days a year. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can totally handle that.
I'm used to no good days.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often does that happen for you, sort of accidentally, when there's some days when you just feel amazing and you're just ready to go? Like is
that
that ever accidental for you?
Oh yeah, that's happened before. Like back whenever I was pressing a lot, like I'd do something like unintentionally where I'm starting to peak at where like maybe I tried something different with like a pin press or something different with like my volume schemes, and now I've added 10 pounds to my press, or like someone got the bright idea of like implementing singles. Now I was hitting PRs there. But in general, it's something that's already planned out, right? So now I have all this base of work that I need to be doing to help better, let's say, the snatch with like a bunch of technical work, with a bunch of volume work. And now we have the day of where I'm going to express this. It's going to be my meet.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 weeks before that, now I'm just ramping up and I'm trying to get that as heavy as possible.
Yeah, that's the game. That's the game,
Yep.
folks. Okay, yeah, back to deloads. We'll finish up with deloads. We're trying to maximize this, and then the priority goes from before we were focusing on just a fuck ton of stimulus, and then if it's a lot of fatigue, that's fine. But now we're focusing on the lowest fatigue being the important thing. The denominator becomes more important. Okay. The ROI, we're focusing on lowering fatigue. Now, for some people, if you're an early-ish intermediate, you've been lifting for like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. That may be literally one offset session. That may be like, I'm going to take a light Monday and I'm just going to get back to normal Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Eventually that gets pretty long. And then you get to the point, and this is the tricky part, is that, like, detraining, we can call detraining is really just getting weaker, not like your maximum 1 rep max your 1 rep max for the day is lower, because that changes a tremendous amount every day for everyone, right? It's not like that theoretical 1 RM is going down. It's more like, you're warming up to 405 and 225 that normally feels fast, feels like shit. 315 that normally feels like fast feels bad. 365 barely moves.
Your general output just feels like shit.
Bam, perfect. Yeah, general output just drops off. Ability to produce force, your power goes down.
Yep.
Yeah, so then in those situations, you don't want to continue training as hard as you can with those lighter loads, right? So like if you normally are deadlifting 405 and then you just start killing yourself by grinding at 335 or 315, you're going to have to literally work your way back up. You're not going to randomly be able to pour 405 again. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to literally walk back up through that because you've detrained to the point. Because normally the timeline shifts, so like if you fuck up your fatigue and then you just keep grinding and killing yourself, you're now, let's say, 5 weeks away from your peak. You're 5 weeks away from that.
Yeah.
It's going to take you another 5 or 6 weeks to get back there. It's not just going to be all right, well, I had 3 good nights of sleep, I should be immediately back to my peak.
No,
that's not how it works whatsoever.
All.
So generally I like to say is that, if it almost matches in length, but it could be slightly shorter, maybe like 80% the length. Like, let's say if you've been absolutely blasting yourself on like a 12-week competition prep, expect 8 to 10 weeks later to feel really good again. Don't expect to feel really good 4 weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard like growing up, like with some of the guys that were coaching me and like we're kind of going and experimenting with like the Bulgarian method. It's usually like the time of exposure. Let's say like they ran it for a month and then they just beat the fuck out of themselves. Usually it takes about 2 months to get out of that.
Interesting. Okay, so that's much longer than my estimates. Okay, and those guys are probably massively strong.
Yeah, those guys were like, they were trying to squat 6 almost every single day. They were pulling 6. Yeah, it's just a shit ton of work without the drugs.
Yeah. So what's the solution, boys and girls?
Drugs, of course.
Yeah, you've heard it here from Chase. Chase, you just got to start pinning insulin into your jugular during the streams, man.
I wish, yeah.
You got to go
like,
intra-arterial.
Like three pumps, just like injected to me. Yeah.
The Bane mask.
Exactly.
Have you ever done the constant infusion ones? The ones that you just like slap on yourself, or like the pumps? What are those called?
I've had a pump, but I've never had the. I know what you're talking about. It's like it's both like the continuous blood glucose reader, and then like it's like a reservoir too. I've never had those.
How are the pumps? How exactly do those feel?
I fucking hate it because I just hate being reliant on this small little piece of technology. Like like the tubing will kind of get kinked up. You have to wear it.
What is it? So it's just like a little like a box. Is it?
Looks like a pager. Yeah, so it looks like a pager. So it's like maybe like a 2x4 little contraption.
Okay.
Has a touch screen. And then the tubing, I got like the shortest possible one, but like usually people get it like in their stomach or their abdomen. I would get it like along my glute or my like my IT band, inject myself there.
Interesting. So it just hooks on your belt and then you just route it through your
I just
pants.
put it in my pocket. Yeah, I just put it in my pocket and then looped it through like my my waist. Like the tubing was probably like 10 inches long. Like not
Interesting.
That long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then is it like a thing where it's like it's constantly just has like a little pin in you, or like what is it? How does that
I have a port. So I basically made a port and then the tubing is detachable from the port. So then I have the tubing and then the pump right here, but then the port's on my body. So
That's
then
sick as
once,
hell.
yeah, like if I'm showering, I detach and then I plug it back in whenever I'm out of the shower.
That's very cyborg futuristic,
Yeah.
man. That's very cool.
Oh yeah.
That seems cooler than just stabbing yourself with needles, or is that less cool? What do you think?
I like the needles, but at the same time, it's more efficient for the pump and stuff like that because you're getting way more. You're
Right.
always hooked up to it. Yeah, it's basically
Yeah.
a pancreas.
Okay, but you just can't like lift and you can't be running around with those things on, right?
I used to lift with it.
Okay.
I'd squat with it in my pocket sometimes, but generally I'd take it out. Like if I would, I don't have a pump now, but like if I was doing like the Olympic lifts with it, yeah, I can't wear it
Yeah.
on me. Yeah,
Yeah. Headphones during the Olympic lifts? Fuck no. My
no,
head's flying back
impossible.
as hard as it can. Everything
Yeah,
just flies out of your ears immediately. Okay, yeah. Anything? Sorry, that was a tangent for the audience. That was all personal questions. Anything else you want to touch on for the fatigue episode, Chase? Why does
I,
everything hurt?
I I'm kind of like cautious about this because I feel like a lot of people are gonna be like, oh fuck, like I think I'm detrained or like I'm really fatigued. Like no, like it takes a while, or you're doing a bunch of stupid shit in order to kind of like see the effects of what we're talking about.
Okay.
For the vast majority of people, I think they're fine, just like training, keep on doing what they're doing, but just take into account like if stuff starts to feel awry or if something feels real slow, what can I do to help manage that? Am I eating? Am I sleeping enough? Am I doing something weird where I'm just like pick and choosing exercises throughout the day, and actually have a game plan with programming? If everything is satisfiable on those ends, yeah, then I would probably look at like, okay, yeah, maybe I am actually heading into a chasm of detrain and fatigue and all this other shit. But again, generally, like novices, intermediates don't really have to worry about this shit.
Most people absolutely do not train hard enough for this ever to be a
Not at all.
concern ever.
Not at all.
Yeah, like it's kind of it's funny now to see a lot of like the low fatigue sorts of things. People are like, oh, you got to train everything at 7. Everything should be super easy and super fast. Like if you go to a public gym, it's full of people training very easy. And if you go
Yes.
to like a hardcore gym where people are moving big numbers around, everyone's fucking killing themselves the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's like you can push that upper limit, and as you get better and stronger, that upper limit will go along with you about how much fatigue you can actually handle. Like in terms of workloads, like a novice lifter squatting 9 sets a week, if you add a 10th set on the, let's say if you go to like the 12th set, in the third week of their NLP, they may get fucked up. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But like a lifter who's been lifting for 5 years, 12 sets of squats a week is nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Most people are not training hard enough whatsoever.
Yep.
Yeah, MJ. He said, reminds me when Rusty said a while back that he used to hate doing certain lifts. Now he hates them all. Nice. Very fun. Yeah, Rusty's a good guy. He's just fucking editing videos, man. He's on the grind. When's the last time you
Yeah,
seen
he
Rusty,
is.
Chase?
It was probably the last seminar that I was
Okay.
at.
How's
Yeah.
he doing? Did he get married? He got
Yeah,
married, right?
he's been married
He's
for
been
a while
married
now.
now?
Yeah.
Okay, man.
But no, he's doing good. He's doing
Okay.
good.
Cool. When's your next seminar, man? When are you going down to coach again?
I don't know. I think in August we'll have one because they're having one this weekend, but I didn't get on it. August, hopefully, I'll be in my next one, but we'll see.
Sickening, man.
Mhm.
I think I have to audit maybe. When did I came down to audit? What was it, last year?
Yeah,
So
it
I
was
think
last
next
year. Yeah, so it's every 2 years.
yeah, next year is the 2024 Strength Club meetup, everybody.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Be there.
But all right, guys, we're gonna log for the day. Thank you very much.